Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Brian Live. I've got an awesome guest this evening, someone we've been trying to get on the show for a hell of a long time. Actually, we're supposed to get Jason Northwood in the studio with us in Johannesburg, but as you can imagine, lots of challenges with stuff like that these days. So, next best thing, Jason Northwood, from the founder of Go Aviate, a real aviation, actually, I'm going to say it, an aviation legend in South Africa. Jason, awesome to have you on the show. Welcome.
Brian, thanks very much for having me, and good evening to all the viewers out there. It's an absolute privilege to be on the show, and a different perspective sitting this side of the camera, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, Jason. It's like I said, been a long time coming. We've been doing a lot of sort of work together in the background, I think, over the past few months. Obviously, you've got the whole Go Aviate side going. Your app's just been launched, so we'll talk about that a bit later on, because there's actually a lot more to you. You know, you're an aviator. You were at Emirates for a while, just about to get your command, and the pandemic struck. You're back in South Africa with your family. You've had to pivot into a completely new industry. So everything that we have been talking about for the past over a year now, you are kind of a prime example of that particular person, a pilot that's actually done something else and made it work. So a real privilege to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your side of the story.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah. Well, I'll give you a bit of a background to myself for starters, if you would like. Just to give you a bit of an overview of my career. I started flying at my local flight school in East London. That's where I grew up. My first job was as a flight instructor at the local flight school. Shortly thereafter, I had a lucky break onto a citation jet where I was flying up, operating in West Africa. That was a character building experience, that's for sure. I won't elaborate any further, but I didn't hang around there too long. I moved on to Salenta Aviation after that on the Beechcraft 1900, where I spent 4 years, the first 3 flying around West and North Africa. And then the last year, I was fortunate enough to join the training department. So I spent most of my days in the various simulators around Johannesburg. After Salenta, I moved into Airlink on the Avro RJ85. I spent 3.5 years at Link, once again fortunate enough to join the training department, and also very fortunate enough to fly my first air show, and last air show for that matter, in the Avro RJ85 at the Pietermaritzburg Air Show. That was with Timo Rebel. I believe he's watching the show this evening. Welcome, Timo. I can't see the names up from my side. But Timo did both my 1900 training at Salenta as well as my Avro RJ85 type rating, and him and I flew the air show together. And then eventually made my lucky break into Emirates. That was in 2015. My wife and I attended a roadshow, Emirates roadshow up in Johannesburg. And that roadshow really just confirmed that the dream we had been pursuing was for us. At the time, there was a surplus of pilots on the market. So Emirates was really looking for Boeing and Airbus type-rated guys, of neither of which I was. So I posed the question at the air show, would you guys consider a guy that wasn't type-rated? And the answer wasn't an outright no, but they were certainly very interested, particularly in Airbus and Boeing type-rated pilots. So we walked out of there, and being the optimist that I am, I said to my wife, there's no ways I'm hanging around another 3 years in another airline for the sake of getting a Boeing or Airbus type rating. The guys didn't say it's impossible, so let's pursue it with all we've got. So I started hounding them rigorously. I would send my application off every single Sunday, and the UAE being a Muslim country, the weekend falls on a Friday and a Saturday. So, and of course, they're 2 hours ahead of us. So Sunday morning routine was to wake up at 5 o'clock, 5:30, send that application off to all the recruitment staff with the intention of having it up front on their emails when they arrived at work at 8 o'clock Sunday morning. And eventually they bit. They invited me over for an interview. So, my wife and I headed over together. At Emirates, they preferably like your spouse to join you on the interview process, being a large decision moving to the Middle East. They want to make sure the family's invested. So we headed over together. The interview at the time was a 4-day process, the first 3 of which are grueling 3 days. They pull you through the ring of fire, all the usual stuff, compass testing, sim check, panel interview, group exercises, etc., psychometrics. So that's the first 3 days. And then the 4th day is really a box-ticking exercise, well, one would think, and that's the medical. So the morning of the 4th day, my wife flew back down south to South Africa, because that afternoon I was due to fly out to Zurich, where I would spend the next couple of weeks giving some instruction for Airlink. And I went into this medical a little bit apprehensive, because one of the challenges I've had in my flying career is that I've got a mild color deficiency. So it was picked up early on in my career. With my initial PPL medical, I had to move up to I was sent up to Pretoria to the Institute of Aviation Medicine, where I did the Farnsworth Lantern test. Once you've done it and passed it, which I did, you essentially have grandfather rights, because the condition doesn't deteriorate. So I was transparent about this at the roadshow and said to the recruitment staff, look, I've got this condition. Is it even worth my time coming? I don't want to waste your time. And they said, it's absolutely no hassle at all. We've got plenty of pilots in active service at the moment with a color deficiency. So don't stress about it. If you get an interview, come on over. So I went into this, into the medical, and they conducted 2 color vision tests on the day. The first one was the classic Ishihara test that you guys will be well familiar with. That's the little booklet with the circles with various colors and numbers inside, of which I fail dismally. Although, interestingly, the numbers you guys can't see, or the so-called normal individual can't see, I can see. But so that was the first test. And then the second test was the CAD test, which unfortunately I fell just outside of the required parameters. And at the time, that was the bottom line. If you didn't pass that test, you didn't pass the medical. So as you can imagine, at that point, I was 12 years into my career. I'd put everything I had into aviation to get to that point, and even got through the Emirates interview, to now fail the medical with the wife halfway back to South Africa. So it was a really challenging day. That fortunately, the doctor on the day said to me, look, you've got one more option. If you would like, I can put you in touch with Professor Barber over at the London City University in London. He designed a lot of these tests. You can fly over there at your own expense, and with no job guarantee in return, of course. Run a series of tests, submit the results back to Emirates. They'll go through a medical board, and as I said, that's no guarantee of a job. So I said, I'm in. Where's the guy's details? I got them on the way to the airport, called them up, and without making it a long story, as you guys know, the Green Mamba doesn't get us much further than position S-Tex. Here I was on my way to Zurich. I had to break the news to my wife. I had a busy sim schedule over there. I was still finding my feet on the simulator over there. So she got involved with setting this visa appointment up, had to shoot down to Geneva and get it done. They approved the visa. It was an emergency medical entry visa is what we applied for. However, they said it would take 10 days to get the visa approved. And this appointment that I had booked with Dr. Barber was in 3 days' time. And miraculously, it came within 3 days. And off I went, did the tests. They came back to a satisfactory standard, sent it off to Emirates. Once again, heard nothing. So I started hounding them. And apologies for talking too much. I'm not giving you guys a chance.
This is awesome. No, exactly.
But so the results were back with Emirates, and we started getting a bit despondent at that stage. We had one thing you got to know about my wife and I. Once we set our eyes on something, we talk it, we believe it, we pray it, we action it, and we chase it until it happens. So we had taken it as far as packing our house up in Johannesburg and placing all our furniture in storage. We were living down at Kids Beach in my in-laws' beach house, and I was commuting up to Johannesburg, flying for Link at the time, basically preparing ourselves to head off to Emirates because we were that certain it was going to happen. And now weeks went by, nothing heard back. And we really started becoming quite despondent. We were on the beach one afternoon and my wife said to me, enough of this negative stuff, enough of being despondent. We can't go down this graveyard spiral. So I'm going to declare it now. You're an Emirates pilot. And I said, you bloody crazy, man. We're becoming delusional about this thing. Anyway, the next morning I went for a surf and came back. I was standing in my wetsuit with my phone on the counter. It was now a Sunday morning, which in Dubai, as I mentioned earlier, is the first day of the week. She said to me, your phone's going to ring now. Emirates is going to call you up for the job. And I tell you what, literally within a minute, my phone started ringing. +971 dialing code. We couldn't believe it. And the job was mine. So,
jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez, what a story. Yeah, we're gonna have to cut that bit, and that's gonna have to be a post all on its own that goes on social platforms and that. I think it's a hell of a lot of people can learn a lot from that. You look, without even hearing that story, and that's the first time I've heard it, Jason. You can tell there's a element of tenacity in your personality. Look, I mean, what you've done and what you've managed to achieve, even since you've been back, is quite remarkable. I think it takes an exceptional human being to be able to even do what you've done. But hearing that story and your keenness to get into Emirates, it makes me so sad now that you're not sitting in a high-rise building in Dubai doing this this interview with us, but you've made the most of your situation. I mean, can you walk us through? Okay, you've taken us through getting in. Can we skip maybe forward a little bit? Obviously, I'd like to talk about working in that sort of multicultural, high-performance environment of Emirates. We'll do that a bit later. But can we skip forward a bit? Because the first time I came across you was you had posted something on LinkedIn, and I think you were actually, I don't know if you had left Dubai yet, but you were on your way back to South Africa. And that was the first time that I actually sort of came across one of your posts. And I actually mentioned it on one of our podcasts. I think, I don't know which number. I was trying to actually find which one it was. But it was like right at the beginning. I said, listen, if you got a bit of time, then go check out this guy. He's an Emirates pilot, and he's got a cool website. And it was, I'm going back sort of almost a year. But I mean, your tenacity to get in, how did it feel when you had to come home?
Brian, sorry, the signal's very bad there from my side, but I think I heard everything correctly there. Yeah, it certainly was. It was devastating, just to give you the picture of where we were at. We spent 5 years at Emirates. The first year was on the 330. I was then fortunate to be moved very quickly onto the 380 as the 330 was phased out. And I spent just short of 4 years on the 380. I did my command assessment, and I was actually scheduled for a command course in mid-March 2020. So my last flight was from Sydney back to Dubai on the 9th of March in 2020. And at the time, the schools in Dubai closed down due to COVID. So my wife and kids headed off back down here to South Africa, which really suited us perfectly, so I could have a quiet house to study in during the course. I started the course. 3 days into the course, the training college shut down due to COVID. A couple of weeks later, we went on to a 50% pay cut. And then a couple of weeks later, after that, lost the job altogether. The time span over that period, I ended up being separated from my family for 5 months, which was really a challenge. It was, all of us sitting here have been affected by COVID, everyone in the aviation industry and many other industries. So I don't want to portray that my situation is by any means harder than anybody else's. In fact, there's people out there with far worse situations. But having spent 16 years at that point, working my butt off, putting absolutely everything into aviation, being on the brink of command in the course. I mean, the command assessment process in itself is grueling, and from under you within a day. Got an email at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to report. I think it was 5 o'clock was my slot the next day, and it was like a culling station. We were literally queued up, one guy in, one guy out, and that was it. So that was a huge thing to deal with. But just going back a little bit, before the actual redundancy date, which was the 9th of June, that time period, between when I got taken off the command course and being made redundant, about a week into that, I sat around, and Dubai was in full lockdown as well. So all I had was my 2 Jack Russells, and that's it. Fortunately, we had a swimming pool, so spend a lot of time in there clearing the mind. But I realized very quickly I cannot sit around here and be idle. This is valuable time. I've got 4 young kids, so normally the house is an absolute zoo, as you can imagine. And now I've got a dead quiet house. This is a great opportunity to do something, but I can't leave the house. So what can I do? And I've always had a passion for training, so I thought, let me put some videos together. And it was all obviously a learning curve, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware with running the podcast, getting the right sound and lighting, etc. And excuse the background I've got here. We're still sort of living in a temporary environment, so we're not quite there yet. But yeah, so that's where Go Aviate was born. Brian, rather. I spent the first couple of months just putting out these educational videos. I got to the point where I put out 3 a week, built some nice momentum, and I'll break there and give it over back to you. Well, in fact, let me just take it to the next step. Then came the move back to South Africa. So I just gained this great momentum, and then obviously the move back home. And that's the one challenge about losing your job when living abroad. If you lose your job living in your home country, yes, it's incredibly challenging. But when you're living abroad, you don't just lose your job, you lose your life. You've got to take your kids out of the school that they're at. You've got to stop shopping at the shops you used to shopping at. Simple things like that. You lose your circle of friends. You've got to give up your house. We had just purchased a villa in Dubai a year before that. So you really give up everything. So the logistics of moving back home were huge. So during that period, I put things on hold. Obviously, once I got home, it was all about adapting back into the family life back here. So the dynamics of Go Aviate changed at that point. And that's where I very quickly started realizing this sort of honeymoon phase, if we could call it that, or bubble of what's happened, has started wearing off now. Initially they said, guys, it's 3 months, we'll be back in the air. And then it's 6 months. And, and suddenly now, a year down the road and more in some cases, that period is worn off. And I've got mates in Australia that are running garden services. I've got mates in Europe driving trucks. I've got a colleague in America farming maize. I'm doing this. You guys are doing a great job at what you're doing. And then you've got guys like Mark selling meat. And I very quickly realized what the aviation industry needs right now is not technical videos. Of course, there's still the guys out there flying, and that's another story of its own. I think, we, by all means, it's just as hard for them as it is for us for many, many reasons. I won't go into that. But I very quickly realized that it's not education we need. It's support, it's an encouragement, it's networking, collaborating, and that's where Go Aviate has grown to at this point.
You've done a phenomenal job there, Jason. I remember, in fact, the day that Brian was speaking about earlier, when that podcast we just finished, and we were wrapping up the studio that day, and he came to us and he said to Brett and myself, "Have you seen what this guy's doing out of Dubai?" And he showed us your website, and I started keeping a keen eye on that ever since then, and I've watched it sort of grow and become what it is over the last few months. And I'm always suitably impressed with the work and effort that you guys are putting into that. Especially now with the launch of the app, Jason. I think I sent you a message the other day just to say, spot on, well done. It's a really, well working and good functioning app. And I think you're really onto something phenomenal there. And it's inspiring, you know, listening to your story now for the first time almost in person. There's a lot of things that I can relate to in terms of what you've gone through. I mean, I remember my early days of trying to get into SA Express, that same sort of anticipation, waiting for that call. And I was in a similar position last year. I was also not far from getting my command, although it would have been on a Q400. But that same gut-wrenching, sort of soul-destroying feeling when it all came crashing down. But it's awesome to share this sort of platform and this format with guys like you who are, you know, taking the bull by the horns and actually just not lying down waiting for better things to happen. So yeah, good job. I mean, just had to throw that in from my side.
Oh, thanks very much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jason, I just want to say that was the greatest 20 minutes on the live show. Let me tell you, you're a storyteller, and I know there are tens of thousands of stories like you, but to listen to your story, man, you had me. I was excited for you, and I was upset for you, and I was sad and down for you just listening to it. So what I love about people speaking up like this, it helps other people actually realize they're not alone. They've been through the same thing. Other people have been through it, and it's just so inspiring to hear your story and see where you've taken it. You didn't just sit back. You didn't give up with it. I mean, hell, not being with your family and your kids for 5 months must have been hell. I know Jack Russell's. I know they kept you busy, but not as much as 4 kids. I can just imagine that. But it's just a phenomenal story. And it's always interesting because I'm seeing, okay, all the A380s from Emirates flying now, 43 destinations. And I got to ask the question, where do you go with this? Is Emirates knocking on your door? Do you think they're going to knock on your door? Or have you said, well, that was it. That was the time. I'm moving on. I'm not going to make that change. I'm not going to move my family back. What are you looking at now?
Look, Brett, I think that's a very relevant and very common question. And it's not an easy question to answer. Because it depends on a lot of things, as far as the prospect of going back looks. 1 month it's positive, the next it's negative. Things were looking positive. Just to put it into perspective, there was around about 4,800 pilots at Emirates. They got rid of, I think it was about 2,500. They put 400 on unpaid leave. Of the 400 on unpaid leave, there was around about 50, I believe, that were called back. And then this India saga took off with COVID in India, and that got put on hold again. So it's up and down. So, from my perspective, I've decided to park aviation for now, to not wait around for it. I've got kids to feed, a family to run. So I just cannot afford to sit and wait around for aviation to come back. I know I'm very fortunate in the sense that we've got great support from both my folks and my in-laws. I'm busy working for my father-in-law on the sales team selling chips, so that's been a big eye-opener, and but also a huge blessing to have an income and a roof over our heads. But Brett, to say I'll never fly an aeroplane again, absolutely not. One day you tell yourself, I'll be good. If I don't fly again, I'll be fine. And then it was just not so long ago, we were sitting at a small airstrip in Richmond having a meeting at the local coffee shop. The pilots' wives that own the airstrip have built a coffee shop in this hangar, and it's magnificent. You sit on the edge of the airstrip. We were sitting out there. Months had gone by since I'd flown, and a Baron started up and taxied out. The owner was actually taking an ex-Cathay captain for a spin. And this Baron, when it came down the runway past the front of us, the grunt that I felt, that was the end of me. I became so emotional, I had to leave the meeting. Said, cheers, guys, I'm out of here. And I drove down a long, lonely sugarcane road, sort of reminiscing on the past. And I think it's in those moments that you realize how passionate you are for aviation. And that passion is still certainly alive. But going back to full-time aviation, that comes with its challenges itself, especially for a long-haul carrier. As much as I loved flying the 380 and we loved our life in Dubai, the long haul flying has some serious challenges in terms of fatigue and family life. So we thoroughly enjoying having me home every night at the moment, and on weekends it's great to be able to plan our life. So just simple things like that. And the last thing I'd say about that is to relocate a family of my size from here back over to Dubai is not a decision to be taken lightly. That's for sure. So to answer your question, I cannot give a clear answer on that right now. I think it would be very situational dependent and depending on what the offer is on the table at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason,
I can believe that.
It's
Brian?
it's amazing to hear you speak about that, because, you know, in a strange way, I've mentioned it to Ryan a few times when we've been having our little pick-me-up chats together, because, you know, we also, you know, went through sort of darker times, and I know you obviously did as well. You sit there and you put so much effort into your chosen career path, and suddenly through no fault of your own, you dealt with all these new sets of challenges, and not so much the challenges, but the decisions that you have to make. And what's really struck me about you, and where I've sort of taken a lot of energy from, is you cannot do what you've done so far. Let's go forward a little bit, because we got the Go Aviate app. I'd like to talk about a bit later on, but you cannot create something like that without being fully committed to something like that. It's not something that you can sort of say, oh, I'll just do this thing on the side and let's just see if it works. There's a huge amount of work, a huge amount of effort, and a huge amount of specific knowledge and expertise that has gone into creating something like that. And it's been quite a thing for me, because we've sort of been searching for this sort of common platform that pilots can use, and certainly the Go Aviate app is one. Duncan Gillespie got a post up by him now. Obviously, he's got his Fly Africa on Facebook. Same thing. It's a central source for aviators to use. And I said to Ryan when was it? Early March. I said, we are going to end up being one of the luckier guys. I promise you. We're in South Africa. We don't have to move home. Our families are still here. It's no big deal. As long as we don't have our job, fine, but we can go and maneuver. Let's do something else, whatever it is. And I really felt for guys like yourself. I mean, I don't even want to know what it's like to have to pick up your family, shift them back to South Africa, settle them back in here, a whole new setup. And on top of that, you've managed to, okay, you've got a new business direction you're working in. You've got this sort of hustle, your Go Aviate, and it's a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of work and a huge amount of dedication that can only come from someone that has all those personality qualities, which, listening to you now for these 28 minutes we've been on, if I was impressed with you before this started, I'm now 150, 200% more impressed by you now, because what a story. Really, what a story. It's fantastic, Jason.
Thanks very much, Brian. I appreciate your kind words, and it certainly it's been a rocky road, as it has for all of us. As you guys know, you've mentioned on your shows before, you have good and just juggling everything and keeping it together. I've got to just take a moment to really give a shout out to my wife. My wife, Jenna, has been an incredible support, not only in my aviation career, but also now. She really has. She's done a hell of a lot of the back end work. I may know how to program the computers on an Airbus, but don't ask me to code an app. I haven't a clue.
Sorry, Jason, I'm jumping in.
Yeah.
Did your wife? So she's obviously been heavily involved in the creation of that app.
Hugely so, Brian. So it started off as a website, as you know, which we launched earlier this year. She's got a business of her own, a women's encouragement platform. And basically, she came across an opportunity to use an app developer in Europe who had an offer where you could buy 2 for the price of 1 type of thing. Because as you guys know, it's not a cheap exercise, that's for sure. So we said, this would work perfectly for Go Aviate, and the 2 sites almost mirror image each other, in terms of their functionality. The content is entirely different. But yes, so she's done all the back end stuff. I'm on the front end telling her what we need, where it must be, what it must look like, etc. And she's been a huge support in that, because it really is time consuming, especially for someone who has absolutely no IT background, which she doesn't. She's done a phenomenal job. And I've totally consumed with the job, my day job for my father-in-law. I've always had the sort of attitude, I can't half do a job. I'd rather just do it properly or not do it at all. So with the selling of chips, I've really been putting my everything into that, which has been a huge learning curve, a whole new industry. So it's been hugely helpful having my wife on the back end sorting a lot of that out.
Well, there's that saying that behind every good man is a brilliant woman. So yeah, true to speak. I think we can all give a shout out to our wives and partners for propping us up in the background. But well done to you guys.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think Jenna needs to launch a little business here, because there's a couple of us that want apps. I think she needs to start putting her details out. Let's bring her in, Jason.
I think the word app gives a headache right now, to be honest. But maybe after a few months of resetting.
Yeah, it's not just it's like a word I use. It's not a Mickey Mouse app. It's a proper setup. But there's a little bit more to this, because this is a central source that aviators that may not necessarily be aviating right now can use to actually collaborate with the likes of yourself and ourselves and anyone else out there to try and kickstart the business that they find themselves in right now. You mentioned Mark earlier. Mark's got meat business, and having a platform like yours where we can actually say, like you said earlier, Jason, all of us, you got friends in Australia affected. I mean, Australia announced now the Cathay Pacific closing a base there. I'm sure that's going to affect a lot of people. To keep it short, there's aviators all across the globe affected by this, and you're going to have to go and pivot and do something else. And whatever that is, it'll be nice not to start from the bottom. It would be nice to start with existing customers. And the aviators have all this in common, where we can say, guys, I've started this and I need your support to get this going. And that's one of the big reasons why I think the Go Aviate app is so important for the industry. And long may it last. And it's only going to work with the dedication of the people like yourself and your wife, but also us as aviators around. We all have a responsibility. The responsibility doesn't just stop with your close circle around your family. Your responsibility as an aviator is to push and promote aviation and aviators. And I think, Go Aviate is a wonderful way to do that. So thank you for that app. But Jason, can we take it a bit forward? Because like I said at the beginning, we're chatting for 35 minutes already. Time goes really quick. Obviously, you're staying in the Hilton area, working with your in-laws at the moment. You're just by talking to you now, you can see you're an aviator through and through. How do you deal with the difficult? You see an airplane flying overhead. How does it not eat you inside? How do you stay so focused on your existing task at hand?
It's a challenge, and I don't overcome it, to put it that way. What I find helps me is various techniques. A huge thing for me is exercise. So whether it be to clear your head in a situation like this, or whatever stressful situation you're going through, for me to get out on my surf ski, well, that was when I was living at the coast. Nowadays, living in Hilton, to get out into my K1 canoe on the dam, Midmar Dam and spend some time out getting fresh air, building some endorphins through exercise. That's what really gets me through, and then just focusing on something with everything you've got, which is what we've done with Go Aviate. During that 5 months in Dubai when I was separated from my family, that was particularly difficult to deal with. And what I did there was a great paddling community, mainly South Africans, and we would be on the water without fail every morning at 5:30, because the majority of the paddling club was pilots all sitting at home. So we paddled every single morning at 5:30 for 2 hours. We'd then have a breakfast together, go home, spend the rest of the day focusing on Go Aviate. And I think that's the important thing. As soon as we sit around idle is when our emotions overtake us and we end up going down these negative roads, which we don't want to do.
Yeah,
I'm seeing that as a common thing with most people who have gone through this, getting out there and doing exercise. People underestimate how valuable that is. When you hit that, I can just imagine that paddle at 5:30 in the morning, it just brings you alive, takes you out of your head, lets you focus, lets you spend time with other people. I think it's so important. And I see it. I mean, Mike Mason, he was doing the same thing. He's doing mountain biking, teaching mountain biking, triathlon training, all of that type of stuff. Exercise is such an critical thing for the mind, let alone the body. I think that's more important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably another thing, I have no doubt it's in your case as well, Jason, is just family. I think that's been my main sort of focus that's kept me wings level through all of it. It's just focusing on the family and, taking advantage of the family time while we have it, just making the best of it. I mean, I think that certainly goes a long way to helping a pilot get through these emotions.
100%. And it's an opportunity that we haven't had in the past when we were in full-time flying, just to be at home now for birthdays. We've just had my wife's birthday last week, got my daughter's next week and mine the week after. And, it was very seldom when I was in full-time aviation to be home for everyone's birthday. It was next to impossible, never mind Christmas and all these other functions throughout the year. So it really is something to cherish and to make the most of.
Yeah, I think that's, when you speak to a lot of aviators now that are in a similar predicament, I think, like Brett asked the question earlier, would you be in an absolute hurry to pick up that old job? And I think a lot of guys are starting to give the similar type of answer, not really. It would depend, because I think in a lot of ways, guys have started to see the light and the benefits of being at home a little bit more. Obviously, the financial aspect would be the outweighing factor in most cases, but yeah, certainly one of the more important things, or the more positive things that have come out of this whole ordeal for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Jason, one of the things that strikes me with you as well, I've never heard you ever talk. You've never said one negative thing about Emirates Aviation, where you worked before, Link, Salenta. You've always been, incredibly positive and pro things. I think people these days we all relate to things that we anti. Classic examples, the Apple Android situation. Instead of just being pro Apple, people are anti Android, or vice versa. And there's something to be said for being pro stuff and not anti stuff. And you are, you pro your situation right now. You're not at the beach, you're not surfing. It might be your first choice of sport, but you're out there on the dam paddling, and you're making the most of your situation right now and all the benefits that come from it, the spending time with your family. And they start to almost take precedence and say, you know what, I'm getting so much value out of these things right now. My whole perspective of life has changed, and I'm not so sure I can go back to what it was before. And certainly for myself, that was one of the things. And I said, if you're doing that, I believe you're on the right path. If you look at it and say, no, I don't want to go back to what things were a year ago, even though a year ago things were great, because we're moving forward all the time. You're making little gains every day. And it's so cool to hear it from your side, and it's so cool to hear it from someone who's an out and out aviator. I mean, let's face it, you're about to get command on a Airbus A380 at the world's premier airline. I mean, it's just ludicrous to actually even consider the fact that we're now talking about, you know, something totally different. But that's life these days. Things happen so fast. You adapt, you make the most of it, you learn a new skill set. You've got the support structure. Obviously, you mentioned your wife, you got 4 kids at home running around, but what an awesome support structure in your wife. And but what an awesome mindset that you have. And I hope everyone listening, and I know everyone listening, will take that on and hopefully maybe adjust their mindsets a bit. Because, you know, you can listen to a podcast, it's about some famous guy in the tech industry or some other industry, and it's great, and you draw inspiration from that. But very rarely, and I've had this experience now just talking to you tonight, very rarely do you hear another aviator with a Green Mamba passport and South African CIA ATP inspire me in the way you have right now. So you've got a story, man, and this better not be the last podcast that you're on. We actually got to get our responsibilities to get you out there so people can hear you and learn from it, because I really think it's fantastic, and I can tell it's fantastic by the numbers going up. It's quite remarkable.
No, thanks very much, Brian. Thank you. Yeah.
Jason, no, I wanted to jump in there. Where's Go Aviate going? What do you see for it? Because you've spent so much time, so much effort there, that this is, you know, Brian mentioned it as a sideline hustle. And having something like that is a sideline hustle, even though it takes most of your time. But it's something that can just, before you know it, can take over and become the income generator, become the thing that you do in life. So it's just interesting that you've started. I don't see you stopping it. I don't see you slowing down with it. But what's your plan? What's your view with it going forward? Or what's Jenna's view?
No.
What's Jenna's view?
You know, if you don't know what to do, ask your wife. She's normally right.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely, Brett, and it's a good question. You know, anything we do it with a big vision. We sort of go big people, go big or go home. And you know, the heart behind Go Aviate, as it says in our mission statement, is to offer support and encouragement to the industry. And what does that mean practically? As I've said, there's guys sitting in Australia running garden services, guys all over the place doing a variety of things. So the idea was to create a central social network platform for anyone connected to the aviation industry. So it's not only for pilots, it's for cabin crew, ATC, aviation business owners, as well as flight schools, and the list goes on. So anyone connected to the aviation industry, a central place where we can, yes, you can do all the usual things you can do on Facebook and LinkedIn. There's social feeds, there's groups, there's forums, etc. But really a place to collaborate. So it's aviator specific. In other words, it's for anybody that's connected to the aviation industry. However, it's also there to promote other business ideas that aviators have created. Look at Mike Mason as an example with Farm to Fridge. So we've got a business directory. You can go on there and advertise for free. By the way, signing up is free. The majority of the site is free for now. It's not a money-making exercise. We'd like to provide a platform for support and collaboration. But so the only area of the site where we incur charge at the moment is for some of our courses. So if somebody places a course, in fact, I chatted to Yolanda from Professional Aviation Services last week, and very shortly some of their CAA accredited courses such as DG will be on Go Aviate. So that's a course one would pay for. We've got an online shop, you know, so you can go and sell headsets, for example, on our online shop, and we would take a cut of that. But every other aspect of the site is free. So at the moment, Brett, we're very focused on obviously getting the numbers up, ironing out all the small bugs. So thanks to all our users for your patience with the minor glitches here and there. But it's a work in progress, and we certainly envision it being a sort of world-class on a world-class level as far as social networks go, but specifically for aviators.
Yeah, I have no doubt it's going to go that route, and I'm pretty sure someone in your position as well, who's got the advantage of being so widely connected, obviously having been part of an airline like Emirates and having made so many contacts, and everybody's landed all over the world now. Have you found that it's made it a little bit easier to spread it, get it out there? I mean, because it's a wonderful sort of position to be in terms of someone who's trying to start a business locally who's not in aviation, for instance. It's a whole lot harder to get your name and your brand, out on a global scale so relatively quickly. So have you found that your Emirates platform has helped in that sense?
Absolutely, without a doubt, Ryan. It's really broadened our horizons. It really has. And one thing I've got to say is I don't want to come across as a platform that's catering for the guys that have lost their jobs, because that's where the ideology came in the beginning. But as I mentioned briefly earlier, I really think there's guys that are on unpaid leave, that are in challenging situations. I know some of the Emirates guys been sitting on unpaid leave. Certain allowances such as schooling and housing allowances, as far as I understand, are not covered if they go back to their home country. So they're sort of bound to hanging out in Dubai, but they're not getting much of an income with all these cuts. So they're using their capital to survive. So there's guys, I just saw a very interesting video yesterday. There's 3 A380 captains on unpaid leave that are working at the organic market in Dubai. I don't know if you saw that. Which is South African owned, in the butchery department. So there's guys like that, and then of course the full time. This period will pass. Aviation will eventually get back to possibly a new normal, but it will pass. And going forward, Go Aviate, we envision still being well alive and operational and adapting to the times as we go and catering for what the industry needs.
Jason, one of the sort of buzzwords last year was pivoting and using skill sets that you've learned in your aviation career in another industry. I mean, can you walk us through? I mean, if we're going to talk about high performance, multicultural environment, there is probably no better airline in the world than Emirates, and you must have learned a hell of a lot. For those of us that didn't go that route, I mean, take myself, done a bit of contract stuff, but SA Express for 10 years. Very local, very domestic, local ideas. What did you learn at Emirates? And obviously, I'm not talking about what you learned in the sim and training stuff, but I mean, just it must be on another level in terms of the stuff you picked up, and you've obviously used a lot of those things to pivot into these new roles you find yourself in now.
Absolutely, Brian. And I don't want to talk too long on it because I see our time is becoming quite limited. But if I could just spend some time on building a bit of a mental picture for the guys who can't relate to an operation like Emirates. Prior to COVID, there was 4,800 odd pilots, approximately 25,000 cabin crew, and 250 plus airplanes operating on a worldwide network. So to run an operation of that magnitude requires some serious infrastructure, a solid foundation, top level training, obviously, and also selecting the right staff for the job. I believe that's very important as well. And Emirates did all of that and so much more. Talking about pilot acquired skills and applying them to another industry, I could sit here all night, but most of you very well know what skills we possess as pilots. But let's just look at preparation, for example. I mean, prepping for an international flight at Emirates or with such a diverse network, you've got to realize that a lot of the time you're flying to a destination you've never been to before. You're flying with crew that you've never met. Or even if you have been there before, you haven't been there for the last year. You've got North Atlantic operations, polar operations. You're flying over the Himalayas when you head to China. And each of those have a whole set of procedures and contingency procedures to plan and prepare. So they had a fantastic company portal with endless resources. So preparation for flights like that would normally start days in advance, where you could access all the necessary resources and plan accordingly. Another interesting thing as far as infrastructure goes with Emirates, they had a chauffeur service. So pilots would be collected from their villa and driven to work, and so would the cabin crew and buses, which made a lot of sense. It's something simple, but if you think about it, on a 380 alone on a long-haul flight, there's 4 pilots, 26 cabin crew, that's 30 people. One is bound to be late. So how do you prevent the operation from running behind schedule? You bring the people to work and no one has an excuse of being late. So, it worked like clockwork. Depending on where you lived, you would have a standard pickup time. For me, it was 2 hours, 25 minutes prior to the flight. The vehicle without fail would be sitting outside my villa. Jump in, you get dropped off at Emirates headquarters, EGHQ, which is across the road from the airport. You walk in, there's probably about 50 e-gates, sign in with your fingerprint, walk up to a kiosk, check into the kiosk with your crew card, and a screen would pop up where you self-certify your documents, your medical, your license, and all that sort of thing. And then another very interesting thing I heard you guys mention on one of your shows the other night, you were talking about drug and alcohol tests and how, one could go through a whole career in aviation in South Africa and never have a single drug or alcohol test. In fact, I'd never had one prior to going to Emirates. And in my short 5 years there, I had 3 drug and alcohol tests. So it would randomly pop up, send you off. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is just to give you an idea of the infrastructure that it takes to run an operation like this. It would then send you off to your briefing room. There were 36 briefing rooms. And the way the briefing rooms were laid out were 2 parts. So you would have a large sort of conference room where the cabin crew would sit, with an interleading smaller room for the pilots. So the pilots would arrive within minutes of each other. And just to set the scene in your mind, it's now 3 o'clock in the morning. You walk into this briefing room as a South African. You've got 3 other pilots on an ultra long haul flight. You've got an Indian captain, the augmenting captain's an Australian, and the augmenting FO is a Brazilian. There's 4 guys from 4 corners of the earth from 4 different cultures. And literally within minutes, you spend 10 minutes together, very brief briefing. You've already all self-briefed at home. It's really just a threat-based briefing. You form a team rapport in those minutes. And then off you go to brief the cabin crew. There's a computer telling you it's now time to go and brief the cabin crew. And there's only 3 minutes allocated to brief these 26 cabin crew, again, potentially from 26 different cultures. And that's what really fascinated and impressed me with that operation, is you could walk into this room and within 3 minutes, you could give them the flight details, establish a chain of command, delegate some flight duties, and then also encourage an open cockpit door policy, so that the most junior grade 2 on the flight wasn't scared to speak up should they see, hear, or smell something that they're not happy with. So it was really phenomenal in that sense. And without going on too much longer, you would head out of the briefing room. Downstairs there were 21 bus lanes. Jump into your bus under network of roads under the airport and arrive almost to the minute, an hour before departure at your airplane. Jump in this airplane, set it up, and then fly into the dark night over the North Pole with guys you've never met in your life, and do so safely and efficiently. It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah, that's quite a picture you've painted there, Jason. I mean, going back to what my career was like at SAX, I think I could have flown to Blumenbach with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
Quite a different setup as far as flying goes. But I'm pretty sure you do miss that.
How can you not miss that environment? I mean, it's so structured, it's so clinical. Yeah, that's the first time someone's actually explained that setup to me. It's quite awesome.
In that much detail, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you say structured and clinical, Brian, but at the same time, it's so comforting. You
Yeah.
know, there's nothing there's nothing left to question. You don't need to ask. Everything is there, put on the line for you. I just love the way certain organizations operate, and I know there's red tape and we haven't had a chance to speak, but I'd love to have you on here. The frustrating bits, because it's not about frustration with Emirates, it's just frustration with anything. You have to have those little bits as well. But the fact is, man, just listening to you, it's like someone who hasn't been on on an aircraft, on the flight deck. Man, it's such a great understanding and feeling that you've given us. Yeah, it's just brilliant, very interesting.
I think there's going to be a fundamental difference though between Emirates and the new SAA version 2 when it starts up there.
Ryan, come on, man. It's just going to be as good. Come on. What are you talking about?
The big difference is the cabin crew and the pilots are going to meet each other for the first time 3 minutes before the airplane departs.
and it'll be the captain's responsibility to make sure all the licenses are all legal.
Sorry, I just had to get that out there. I couldn't keep that one in.
It will be interesting. I think it's tough enough for established airlines like Emirates in the current climate out there. So it will be very interesting.
It's nice to be explained that. Jason, you said there that you self-brief at home. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I think there's a few pilots out there that one of the things at Somero that we talk about a lot is this, going over these rehearsals. What are you going to do today if something goes wrong? And, not to run any countries down or, it's not about that at all. But when you're in an environment like that, you learn all these things from lots of other people. I'm sure you learned a hell of a lot from some of these captains that you flew with there. And in Africa, we probably a little bit more isolated, so people don't get to work with someone like you. You're stuck in your smaller environments. I mean, even us at SA Express, you're in that environment. Unless someone's bringing new information in, you're working in this pool of knowledge. Briefing at home, what would you do? How would you prepare for a flight?
Brian, I'd always start off by asking someone who's been there and done that. I think there's nothing like getting information out of the horse's mouth. So I would start. If I knew I was going to a destination that was renowned to be difficult, a classic example's JFK, start asking guys on the weeks leading up to that you fly with, what tips do you have for JFK? What are the threats? To build a mental model. That's what I really try and aim at doing in terms of preparation, is building a mental model for the flight. Do they keep you high? What are the common sort of things? Give you a runway with a tailwind for landing, or whatever the case may be, just so you can plan accordingly. But other than that, there's so many resources that Emirates had. You could look at a specific route and get all the information you needed, but it was sometimes quite overwhelming, to be honest, especially in the beginning, like your first North Atlantic crossing, for argument's sake. At the end of the day, it's fairly straightforward until things start going pear-shaped. I had one or two incidences where we were unable to get a clearance and things like that, and then the guys start sitting up straight in their seats and looking through all these procedures. But there's a hell of a lot of resources. So I would prep. To go into detail, I think we would be here all night. But I was just listening to Ian Finley on last week's or 2 weeks ago's show, and was quite inspired to hear about the way he preps, because I'm pretty the same. I think I'm a bit of an over prepper. Even back to my Airlink days, I recall also, like Ian said, being at sign on half an hour before everyone else, getting the paperwork in order, etc. But I really believe that the more well prepared you are, the smoother things go, and it makes the operation less stressful. It frees up capacity to to be able to focus on other things and pick up other threats that are going on around you. You know, on numerous occasions, I sat in the jump seat as augmenting crew coming out of Washington, for argument's sake. I remember the one day the FO jumped in, a well-experienced guy, had been at Emirates longer than me, and he jumped in and he started looking through the AOIs and CCIs, which were company basically points of procedures at that particular airport, and that should have all been done at home, you know. So the guy got so overwhelmed, he then missed the departure clearance. The captain had to get it for him, and the thing started going pear-shaped. So it goes without saying, as Alex McPhail has mentioned in a lot of his conversations as well, that preparation is key.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear that. It's something that I think is lost on a lot of people, and as Alex, taking him again, because he's also one of the guys, you know, shout out to Alex. He said to me, you got to get a hold of Jason Northwood, you got to get him on the show. And Emirates obviously has a massive infrastructure to provide you with information. I'm sure your route briefings were a work of art. I mean, you talk about going to you know, big airports in the States. Obviously you've got a bit of route prep that you can do. Personal prep, you mentioned asking people, so you know, from the horse's mouth. But a good advice there, ask people. I find people that we don't do that enough these days, particularly aviators. You know, you're almost too scared to ask a more senior captain, hey, what do you think about this? And Ryan, we're talking about a senior a captain from SACS, a huge amount of knowledge, but there's no ways I'd ever ask the guy a question, because he had asked me a question back at it, and I'd feel like an idiot because I probably couldn't answer the question. There's something to be said for if someone asks you something, then provide that person with as much information and knowledge as you can, just the way you've done tonight. So I think it's a nice a real nice way to do it in aviation. We got to pass on that knowledge in Africa in particular.
One last thing I'd like to touch on there, Brian, in terms of preparation that just came to mind, is I believe that a huge part of it is reflection. So, you know, the difference, but Emirates was quite big on the difference between being experienced and being an expert. What is the difference between an experienced pilot and an expert pilot? And another instructor of mine once said, and I think he's watching the show tonight, is he'd rather take a guy with 1,000 hours of doing the right thing than 10,000 hours of doing the wrong thing. And that is so true, you know. And so reflection was a big part of the operation at Emirates. After parking in the bay, we would reflect between the four of us, or in some cases 2 of us, depending on the amount of crew, and see what we could have done better. But taking it a step further than that, because usually after 17-hour flight, guys aren't too keen to talk about reflection. But I would normally go home the next day, or 2 days later, once I'd recovered, and spend some time making some notes. Because of the diverse route network, you would go to a place like New York that I mentioned earlier, and you wouldn't go back there for 18 months. You know, so 18 months later, and when you go back there, Murphy's Law, you get called out 30 minutes before the flight at 3 o'clock in the morning with no prep. So I would go home and make my own notes. What exactly happened? What runway was I given? What they kept me high, etc., etc. Really simple stuff. So next time I go there, I could pull that out and say, well, these are my threats. And I would build on that. So I almost built my own FCOM volume 10 to refer to, which was really handy. And I think reflection in anything in life, one has to reflect on our performance if we want to better ourselves.
Such wise words, actually. And yeah, I think, you know, it's probably something we should all be doing right now in this particular period of our lives as well, because no doubt we are going to look at this in 5-10 years down the line and you know, ask ourselves similar questions. And yeah, it'll be an interesting read, I'm sure, to look back in 5 years' time to this and say, well, how did we get through this? And yeah, awesome. Wise words, Jason. Thanks very much, man.
Okay. There was one last thing I wanted to touch on regarding multicultural, but I see we've gone over an hour. So
No,
I don't know if we
I
should
went off.
leave it to
I
next
went off
time.
earlier to extend this a bit because I didn't want this to end. So to carry on, Jason.
Go for it.
Okay, yeah, just one last thing I would like to touch on, and that is obviously operating for an operator like Emirates in a multicultural environment. I touched on it earlier as far as the briefing room scenario went and how we would form a team rapport within minutes and go and operate through the night. And I think that was really remarkable. Where Emirates got that right was they selected the right guys. There was a very low cockpit gradient, which I was unused to coming from an aviation environment in South Africa. We raised in a very respectful way. There's different cultures around the world. Another one is Asia, where they really respect the hierarchy. And at the end of the day, it's not about not respecting the captain, but just something simple like calling a captain. If you do that at Emirates, the guy looks at you like, who you speaking to? Is there someone behind me? But that didn't mean that you didn't respect him. You know, each guy knew what his job involved and entailed. Each guy was professional. He was at a level of his career where he was experienced. He knew what was expected of him, and we got on with the job. But having said that, communication was a real challenge as far as multi-cultures go. So a quick story, when I joined Emirates, there was a group of 15 of us on the course, and I arrived late to one of the briefings. My transport was late or got caught in traffic. And I walked in and I apologized. And I was the only South African with 15 other or 14 other cultures in the room. And I said, look, guys, I'm really sorry I was late. All the robots were red, and there was a huge jam up at the city center circle. They all sort of looked at me, and at the first coffee break, one of the Italian guys, who was actually my neighbor, came up to me and said, "What are robots and what is a circle?" You know, and I very quickly realized the importance of communication when operating in a not only a multicultural environment, but any flight deck environment, and in any other industry for that matter, because it's amazing how quickly things can be misinterpreted, especially in the flight deck in a critical phase of flight.
Sure.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's classic. I just listening to you, Jason, talking about preparation and planning. You can take that anywhere. If you don't have that as a base for yourself, we always remember success or failure snowballs equally as quick. And preparation and planning is those two areas which, if people don't have or inculcate, grow within themselves, can snowball that failure so much quicker. And we've always spoken about aviators and pilots. You are a true aviator. You prepare, you plan, you think ahead, you make notes, all of those things. And you might think of it just as I'm going to do it for myself. But when you do it that way, it makes the future so much easier because you've taken care of things. So it was just so striking listening to you talk about that. It's often not spoken about, but it is critical in life, in anything you do, whether you're on an A380 deck or you're selling chips. Doesn't make a difference. Both are as important for you in your life and your family, and having that inculcated in you is just brilliant. So yeah, I love that. I picked that up and I really enjoyed it, Jason. Thanks, man.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll have to speak about piloting other industries another day when we have more time, but just applying some of these things into selling chips for argument's sake. And as you say, preparation provides huge benefits and makes your life easier in the long run.
Yeah, Jason, I've taken a huge amount out of tonight. I really have. I've loved everything you said, from getting into Emirates, the difficulty, the challenges you had, not giving up, having a support structure around you, mainly your wife, and going on this journey together. What's the point of going on a journey alone? No one wants to do that. And you're an epitome of someone who's, built a high performance team around your family. And if you're living in that environment every day, all day, every day, man, it's only going to push you forward and make you go places. Taken a lot out of it. Ryan, I like your point that you mentioned there. Maybe not a bad idea now, you know, but Jason's advice there, write what's happened down. This could happen again. We might need to do this all again. And yeah, a really fantastic show, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic listening to you. It's actually been the first show that I've ever done where I felt so relaxed, because the story that was coming in from the other side was it didn't have to be pushed. It didn't have to be, you know, forced. It was something that, you know, I would listen to on my own accord. It's just cool that it's on our show. It's fantastic. I've really enjoyed having you on the channel tonight. Jason, what can people do? I want to go and support Go Aviate app. Is there anything I can do to support you guys? Where can people find your stuff? Where do you like being contacted on? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it through the app? Is it email? Where can people find you?
Yeah, we got a big presence on social media, so certainly Facebook, LinkedIn. There's links from there directly to our app and our website, depending on what device you're on. So the app is currently available in both the Apple iStore as well as the Google Play Store for Android. So it's easily accessible. You download it, share it. As far as contributing for now, would just be great to have you on board. Get on there, get active, post, share, promote each other's businesses, and let's grow this thing together. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. It's been a lovely evening. I've really enjoyed it myself. As always, thanks to everyone that tunes in to listen. A live show relies on people watching, you know, as it goes. So really fantastic. Always a lot of loyal support that we have. I'd like that loyal support to trickle across to your app as well. I know a lot of the guys that support us have moved across and are starting to support Go Aviate. So please carry on with that, and let's support each other. If you've got a business and you've started, doesn't matter what the hell it is, just let's support. Get it on Go Aviate, so we know it exists, and then let's channel our you know, buying process through that app. It's fantastic. As always, we'll push out another show. It'll come out on Friday, the more sort of formalized show. Hopefully this week we're in the studio. Danelle, of course, has been without electricity for over a week. Some difficulties they've been having there. It looks like it's being sorted out. So yeah, hopefully we'll be in our studio this week. And Jason, this is definitely not the last time we chat. You mentioned, you know, the skills and things you learned pushing that into another industry. We have to talk about that. That's another show in itself. It flew by tonight. Really fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to you, your wife, for supporting you, because aviation needs guys like you. South African aviation needs guys like you. And South African aviation can be very proud of someone like you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next week, I'll say goodbye for now. Jason, please stay on there. We'll see you on the other side of this ending. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.
Thanks. Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.